Hi, welcome. This is Women's Money, seminar number 5. We're going to talk about credit tonight. My name is Carrie Rattle. I'm CEO and founder of Behavioral Sense and proud to be a Women's Money mentor. So tonight I've got a special guest who is an absolute expert on credit scoring, Serge Bevel from Vantage Point Credit. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Serge is far more of an expert than I am, and he's here to answer all sorts of questions because credit score questions cover the world in terms of depth and complication. So just as always, we talk about housekeeping here. We've got Greater Austining TV at the back of the room. Thank you very much for filming us again. So for the first hour during the lesson, we'll have Greater Austining TV. And then the second hour, for anyone who wants to ask a specific question, then we turn off the recording and we can get down to anything personal you want to talk about. Okay, very good. This week, hot topic, credit score. That's why we have Serge here, as I mentioned. So let's talk about credit. Credit is sort of pervasive. It's in the North American culture. And just about everybody has credit, and credit scores surprisingly touch more things than you think. So we talk about credit scores for being able to get a credit card. We talk about credit scores for being able to get a loan. And what people don't talk about is quite often an employer will look at a credit score as well when you're getting a job. It's not frequent, but it's occasional. It's occasional when you may be a security risk or when you're touching a lot of cash. Having come from the financial services industry, I can tell you more than once in different branches I worked in, people were caught taking money from clients. It happens, and it's not because they wake up and say, I want to steal. They get ill, and they have healthcare bills. They run into debt, and they just can't make ends meet, and they start by saying, well, I'll just take $20. So it happens, and so sometimes employers like to ensure that if you have a good credit score, you're probably okay managing your cash so far, and you're not going to go astray. So credit score can be used for some really interesting things. And I'm going to ask Serge in a second here to talk a bit more about that. But I want to talk about credit in terms of a responsibility. People don't realize that when they have credit cards, they're borrowing, right? We are borrowing from a bank. We are borrowing from Macy's and their credit partner. So they're trusting us. They're trusting us to pay back that money when we get paid or when we have cash. And when we start eroding that trust, how do you measure that? They decide, wow, I'm not sure I want to ever trust Carrie again. I gave Carrie a credit card, I gave her $10,000 and she's not paying it back. So how do you tell another lender that Carrie is not trustworthy? And the way they do that, of course, is with the credit score. So it measures your everyday money behaviors. Are you good at your everyday money behaviors? You guys follow that? Do you know what your credit scores are?
No.
You don't have to tell them to me, but do you know
I
them?
do, because one of my credit cards tells me what it is.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and so probably specifically from that company. Now, Serge, we can talk about this, and I'm going to invite you in here
Sure.
to talk more about the different scores and where they come from.
Okay.
There's a ton of them.
mhm.
When we talk about credit, first understand what credit is about. Basically, if you, let's say basically either for an auto loan or for credit cards or mortgage, basically someone is extending you money on the premise that you will repay it. In order to do that, how do they assess whether you are quote-unquote credit worthy? Are you worth it? So what all lenders have to assess one thing and one thing only, and that is risk. What kind of risk do you propose to them? So how do they measure that? They have to decide, how are we going to understand whether you're creditworthy? The only way we could do that is create a criteria of questions. And those questions are going to be how you pay your bills, what is your income stream, you have a history of repaying other people. So the only way they can do this is to first look at a credit report. And your credit report really reveals who you've done business with over the years. That means with any mortgage lender, with any credit card issuer, any automobile manufacturer, any insurance company, or anyone else who's extended you credit. Your credit report now has a profile of every single one of these accounts and how you pay them monthly, month after month. And it shows, did you pay on time or did you not? Were there lapses? If you have credit cards, what kind of balances do you keep? Very high balances, very low balances. So by starting to look at the profile of how you conduct yourself financially with other creditors, they begin to now assess what degree of risk you bring to them. And also, in the credit scoring system, there's over 350 algorithms that trigger every single response of how you use credit. And that's what establishes a credit score. So your credit score is basically a performance rating of how you've used credit in the past. So when a credit card issuer, for example, looks at your credit report, sees how many accounts you have, what kind of balances you have, how well you pay them, and they begin to now assess where you stand responsibly. And then they look at your income stream, and they have an equation to figure out your income stream relevant to your credit rating. And they will determine if they will approve you or not, and if they will, under what terms and conditions, meaning the interest rate, how much money they will lend you. Will they give you a credit card for $5,000, $10,000, $20,000? That all depends on your profile, on your credit report, and the credit scores that you've achieved. So that's the general landscape. Now, what's important to know when we're talking about credit scores, they're very confusing. Why? There are many different scoring systems. And I don't want to take you away from the place that may be too complicated. But if you were to go online and say, I want to look at a credit report, you could get, most credit reports will show the Fico 8. That's the current software that they use. It could be Fico 9, it could be Fico 3, it could be the Plus score. So it can be confusing because if you go to one site versus another site and you get a credit score and a credit report, unless you read what scoring model they have, how do you know which is the right one for you? So as a generalization, I would advise you that right now, the Fico 8 is what most companies are going to use to score you. So you can order a credit report online, look for Fico 8, that model. And when you look at your credit report, the credit score you will have will generally be within 20 points of the other systems. One could be 20 points higher, another credit score could be 20 points lower. If you went to Credit Karma, it could be 60 points higher. If you went to a Plus score, it could be 30 points lower. So the reason why you want to get a general bearing where your credit score is if you use the Fico 8 right now, that's going to pretty much put you in a range within 20 points. And the reason why I say that 20 points is that because if you were going to apply for insurance, or if you're going to go to an auto loan, or if you're going for a rental in an apartment, or going for a mortgage, each one of those creditors are going to pull up a different credit report. Some are going to be higher, some are going to be lower. The reason why they vary is because those reports are specific to certain risk factors. I go back to risk. When you go for a mortgage, there are many more risk factors that they measure you by, and that's why those scores typically are lower. If you go for an automobile, if on your credit report it shows that you've had other cars and leases and auto loans, you will score higher because you have a history of that. Whereas if you don't have that, You may score lower. So these are some of the variations. So you have to say to yourself, when I look at a credit report, I understand that there are different scores. I want to look at a Fico score. The Fico system is what's universally used by the majority of creditors. So if you stay with that versus the Vantage score, and there's a Credit Karma has their own scoring model, you don't want to go on other models because they'll get too confusing and it's not really relevant to what your typical creditors will use. So that's what direction you want to take. Okay?
So surprise, right, that there are hundreds of different credit scoring scorecards out there.
Yeah, I knew that there were 3 companies
Yes.
a while back that had.
Well, let me answer that. There are more
Yeah.
than 3 companies. There's actually over 2,000 credit reporting agencies.
Okay.
The 3 major ones are Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Those are the biggies, okay? And what they do, they're nothing more than one big data bank. That is to say, creditors pay by subscription to report your information to the credit bureaus. They store that information, and that score that you get is a snapshot in time. That is to say, whatever your credit score is today, that's for today. Tomorrow, it could be higher or lower, depending on the usage and what has been reported by your creditors on your credit report. So it's important to know that if you're going to be going for a credit card or a mortgage or a loan or anything else, that you want to make sure that you keep a good focus on your credit scores and pay your bills down so that your score is the best representation of your financial abilities.
So we'll get into that a bit more. We're going to talk about your credit score pie chart. So if you go to your binder, it's on page 43, and you're looking at the blue or black pie chart there, depending on whether yours is in color. So this is really, really important to understand if you look at this pie chart. And for those of you on TV, you have to join the course to actually see this, but we'll talk to the percentages. There are 2 that are absolutely key, that are a large portion of your score. One is your payment history, and the other is amounts owed, right? So payment history is 35%, amounts owed is 30%. So let's talk about those. Payment,
Question.
yes.
The payment history goes back how many years? Is it from the beginning of time or?
10 years.
10 years only, okay.
Good credit stays on for 10 years.
Years.
Derogatory credit stays on for 7, with
Okay.
the exception of a couple of exceptions.
Yeah, yeah. Like a,
So, I have a question. I decided not to use a credit card.
yeah.
So I go, I shop, and I decide not to. Even if they extend me or they give me a credit card, I do not accept it.
You don't want to use it.
I don't.
Okay.
So, as you say, you're saying now, I think if I want to borrow something, I will be in trouble.
You won't be in trouble. It'll be difficult. The United States, compared to all other countries, let me put it in the right perspective, is a capitalistic society that's credit-driven. That means, unless you take out a $10 bill from your wallet to pay for something, everything that you do in some capacity, some way, will relate to credit. That's just a system that we have. If
I
you want to
have
rent a
I
car,
have a card, not just to go and ask for a credit. I use the card,
You use your credit card.
yes.
Mhm.
you have a credit card.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
but I do not have to go and borrow, get another extra card to shop.
If you have one card, it's at least good to have. Certainly in emergencies, it's good to have. But I'll give you a perspective. According to the Fico scoring system, they've created the credit score and the models of how do we judge a person by their credit. And their models say that a good representation of a person who is financially fit is someone who has one mortgage, at least 3 to 5 credit cards, and 1 installment loan. An installment loan could be a auto, it could be a student loan. Now,
Yeah,
you
I
may
have
not choose to
student-
have 5 cards or 3 cards.
I have student loan, which
Yes,
allows
student loan.
you-
So on your credit report, that shows that you have an installment loan, which is really important. And in the credit report, when we talk about risk, one of the ways that they measure risk is they want to see how you can handle fixed expenses, that's a loan, reoccurring, same amount each and every month, versus variable debt, credit cards. You know, one month you may have your minimum payment may be $25. Next month it could be $75. Next month it could be $42. This fluctuation, do you have enough cash flow to pay those bills? So you could state your income, but a creditor has no way of really seeing it other than a mortgage company. They may require pay stubs. For credit cards, they don't do that. But how you pay your bills reveals everything, especially if you have a minimum payment and you pay additional. So if your minimum payment is, let's say you owe $300 on your credit card, and your minimum payment is $25. If you make a payment of $50 or $75 to pay more, well, that shows obviously that you have cash flow. And these are things that begin to demonstrate patterns of your financial strengths, your capabilities. It also demonstrates your discipline. You choose to pay more towards my bill versus I think I'll have 3 more lattes this week. You know, no, I want to pay my bill because paying my bill is timely, and I don't want to pay any more interest than I need to. I want to show that I'm responsible. And a credit report reveals your degree of discipline or responsibility financially.
So even though she has credit cards but does not use them, and she uses cash, should it be that she uses them knowing that she has the cash and she puts them aside, and when the invoice comes in, she pays it off?
She could do that.
And she could
It's a
use
combination.
credit.
There's many ways to look at how you govern your finances. Using cash is a good thing to do because it's, you know, we have cash, you get all American Greenback, it's a good thing.
Mhm.
But using credit, if you use it responsibly, the purpose of credit is nothing more, it's a convenience to use plastic versus cash at a point in time.
Mhm.
So if you're saying, I'm going to buy groceries and my groceries are $55, but I have $30, do I elect to put $30 and put the other $25 on my credit card? Or do I pay the $55 on my credit card, knowing when I get home, I put the 30 aside, knowing that at the end of the week, I can put aside that other 25 and responsibly pay that. So I use that convenience, but I'm responsible to pay it, as opposed to charging 75, knowing I can't afford more than 55, and then when the bill comes, well, this is a bit more than I expected, and then, well, it's due tomorrow, and I don't have that money tomorrow, but I'll pay a couple of days later. And then this is where things now become more complicated. So it's a question of deciding ahead of time how you're going to use the card. Cards are not used impulsively. They're used with thought.
So just circling back for a second, because Serge and I both touched on this. I want to give you the whole pie, and then we can dig into it a bit more. So you've got your 35%, which is your payment history. So that's paying regularly, paying on time. If you pay it all off as opposed to minimum payment, then you're very, very disciplined. Your mortgage payments are never late, or your rent payments, your utilities are never late, all of that all goes into your payment history. So how good have you been at paying everything on time, right? And then the other 30%, so this is the amount owed. I often call it usage.
That's right. Utilization.
Yeah, utilization. So for example, the ideal utilization is 20 to 30%. So if you have a credit card with a line of credit of $10,000 and you have on it $2,000 in charges, that's 20% utilization of the credit line. If you have $3,000, it's 30%. So if you only put that amount on and pay it off regularly, what it's saying to credit companies is that, wow, she's not using it all, she's only putting some on, and she's paying it off every single month. This is a disciplined purchaser who's managing her cash well. If you run up 10,000, and this is a good question for you, Serge. So let's say it's a one-time thing, you run up the 10,000 because you just bought a secondhand car using a credit card, which some people do, right? So it's all of a sudden your usage is 100% on one card. What's that going to do to the credit score if all other cards haven't really changed?
You've increased the
You're a risky
risk.
person, if that, yeah.
You've increased the risk, and let me explain it to you. That the credit scoring system, that's the one that's monitoring and scoring your performance. So if you have a $10,000 line of credit on your card, and at the end of the month you pay your bills, and let's say you have a balance of $2,000, you're within what they consider a safe range. Once you start to go 40, 50, 60, 70%, and you're just making a minimum payment or a small payment, you're demonstrating that you're a much higher risk because you borrowed a lot more, but you're not paying in fact proportionally to what you borrowed. So if you said, I have to buy a car, $10,000, now you have it, okay. But if you said, I can afford a car payment of $500 a month, but I can't get an auto loan, but I'm going to put it on my card, but I'm going to say to myself every month, it's 500, 500, 500, and within a short period of time, I'm going to pay this down. Your score will take a hit, it'll go down, you maybe lose 10 points, 15 points, but then eventually it'll go back up as you start to pay it down.
And a question about the cards. Like if you charge but you pay the balance and you never pay interest because you always pay the balance, are you okay or? Okay.
I know people who can't live with themselves if they have to pay interest at the end of the month.
That would be me.
I just pay.
I will tell you a little caveat to that, is that the scoring system was designed to measure balances against limits. So if each and every month you pay off the full balance, you show that you're disciplined, you pay, and that's all fine, you'll have a high credit score. But if you alternate, 1 month paid off, and the next month leave a small balance, $20, $30. If you have a credit card with a limit of $10,000, and it measures the remaining balance of $20, it's so radically different. And believe it or not, that's what it wants to measure. You're going to score the same or if not higher. So what I do is I pay full or I leave a small balance. Back and forth, back and forth. And by doing that, I'm allowing the system to measure my performance. So if I measure something that is really no risk at all, then it helps me.
Now, going back to the credit cards, when you don't pay off your whole balance, you do incur interest, right? So what you have to look at is your cash flow versus are you trying to bump your credit score up? So there are choices. Serge likes to pay it off and then leave a little bit, pay it off. I pay it off all the time. I sleep better at night. It's right, because it's also money in motion. And I don't worry about my score right now, but if I were worrying about my score, then I might behave a little differently. So it's just knowing that when you behave certain ways, it affects your score. Does it matter to you or not, based on what you're trying to do with your score? If you don't need your score for anything short term, you have a brand new car, you have a mortgage, you're fine with that, your credit cards are okay. If you don't need a super good score for anything, then you may make a choice, right? But it's knowing that when people look at that score, they look at your trustworthiness. Yeah, so then we have the 35%, the 30%, so that's 65, right? Then we have the little bits, so and I'm going to leave new credit for last because we can talk about that too. So there's the length of your credit history. For example, if you're a student and you're lucky enough to have a credit card that mom and dad co-signed with you, it's great to start credit history at 18 years of age. And then when you're 40, you've got great credit history. So that's the idea. But if you're young, you can't have long credit history because you're young. So it is what it is to a certain degree. And then the types of credit, Serge talked about this as well, right? The installment loan versus the mortgage versus the credit card. So we covered that. And it's good to have some of each so that they see that you manage them all well. Then there's new credit.
Right.
Talking about somebody who, and this happens to homeowners. So here's a scenario. I'd love you to talk about, Serge, because so many people do this. A couple, they buy a home. So now they have a mortgage. Then they go open 8 new credit cards, right? Home Depot, Lowe's,
Bed Bath and Beyond.
you name it. And it goes and goes. So like boom, 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 boom. What does that do to the credit score?
Well, it drops the credit score because each time you apply for credit, there's what's known as a hard inquiry, any financial institution. So a hard inquiry, you're going to lose anywhere between 2 to 4 points. So if you've opened up 8 cards, 4 each, if they're separate, so that's automatically like 16 points. And all you did was just open up a card. Your score just went down. So you say, well, okay, it'll recoup itself within a year and a half. You'll gain those points back. But now you have those cards, and what happens? What's the first thing you want to do? Spend as much as you can. I want to get curtains, I want to get a rug, I want to get a barbecue in the lawnmower, and I'm just going to rack up those cards.
That's right.
And then guess what?
They
2
get
months
paid.
later, 3 months later, these statements start coming in and saying, well, guess what? We just have $300 additional credit we have to pay for per month. And we have like $7,000 we racked up on these cards. And these are high interest cards because a bank card, Chase Bank, Wells Fargo, doesn't matter. The interest rate on that type of card versus a store card, like a Home Depot, a Bed Bath & Beyond, a Lowe's, a Walmart, a Target, those interest rates on those cards, they're considered private label cards. They're not issued by a bank. Another bank has to support those. And those typically start at a minimum of 20.9, usually 24.9%. So when you start breaking down the monthly payment, you say, I have to make a $60 payment. But wait a second, $35 is interest. No one told me about that. So you're repaying, but look how much more. You're paying a surcharge for the convenience of charging. So with that said, using a card is to use it responsibly for an intended purpose. I don't have the money on me now, but I do have the money. I'm using the convenience, but not having the money. And to use it and have the expectation that, I'll have it tomorrow, don't worry. That's irresponsible. And that now demonstrates that you are high risk.
Yeah.
And your credit report is going to reflect how you pay and your balances. And creditors, they've been accountants and doing this for years, and they can tell exactly where you're coming from.
And if you think about it, not only are you tight on your cash flow now, not only have you reduced your credit score 16 points, but if your usage
Goes up.
on each card goes up, so if you've got a $10,000 line of credit, you're shopping at Bed Bath & Beyond, and you've got pillowcases, you've got bedspreads, you've got rugs, you name it, all of a sudden $5,000 on a card, your usage is 50%, your credit score goes down further, right? So you better hope that you don't have to get a car loan anytime soon, because we're going to talk about that in a second. and how your credit score affects the interest rate you pay on a car loan.
Well, it either goes up or down depending on you as a risk.
Oh, yes.
We're used to it, yeah.
People don't think about this. Did you want to talk anything more about the pie chart?
No, the pie chart really, the scoring system created the pie chart for the purposes of really trying to break down and understand how do we assess your credit score. We break it into, there's multiple categories, but these are the basic categories. So the two biggest ones, how you repay and how much you owe, that's 65%. That's a tremendous portion of your score. So right off the bat, you have to say to yourself, if I'm going to use credit in any capacity, I have to think about my ability to repay. I want to make sure I can repay. And as long as I repay in a consistent, timely manner, that's going to reflect my financial strength. And one of the things that people don't realize, when you look at a credit report, and if it has some tarnishes, some negative history, you have to say to yourself, is that credit report, is it really a true representation of who I am? It probably is not. You as an individual or one person, that credit report represents one aspect of something that may have happened at a point in time. So you don't want that to be a misrepresentation of who you truly are. So just kind of think of it that way. So that's not me, you know? I paid 1 day late, but you don't understand the circumstances. That can't happen.
Yeah.
That can't happen. I'm going to give you a trick before it's on my mind. On your credit cards, okay? Tomorrow, call up the credit card issuer and say, look, my bill is due on the 27th of the month. I'm giving authorization, and here is my checking account number. That if for any reason you have not received my minimum payment by the 27th, I give you authority to withdraw it from my checking account. They love that.
Of course.
You know what? What you've done is you've ensured that you will never be late. You just created an insurance policy for yourself. So worst case scenario, I forgot something, I got sick or whatever. If you're not paying huge bills, if it's there, you know you're going to pay it, but something happened. Murphy's Law, you're covered.
Yes.
An
And
easy thing to do.
if you're really good at making your payments regularly and you have a bad month and you miss it 1 month, you can call them up. They're pretty forgiving. Like, hey, I've been paying my card on time for the last 5 years. I went on vacation, I forgot. They're really usually pretty good about reversing the interest charge and forgiving you. Now, if you try to do that every 3 months, no. No, it's like, okay.
It's not going to work.
She's got us on speed dial every 3 months. This isn't going to happen anymore, right? So here's why I want to give you a really amazing example of why your credit score is so important. And then we're going to get into how the interest rates can vary based on your credit score. So Serge and I each buy the same house. We're going to be next door neighbors. Exactly the same house. My house is $400,000. His house is $400,000. The yards are the same size. The floors inside are the same size. The kitchens are exactly the same. The roofs are exactly the same. So we're buying exactly the same house side by side. So Serge has a credit score of 740. I have a credit score of 680. So Serge goes to the bank and he gets a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Lots of people do. They give him 3.7%. So he has to pay every month for that $400,000 house $1,841.30. I'm buying the same house, but I go to the bank, the same bank. They give it to me for 4.5%. 30 years fixed, but 4.5 instead of 3.7. I pay every month $2,026.74 for the same house, right? Because, and that mortgage is there for 30 years, so unless I refinance, every month, Serge has more cash in his wallet than I do. So at the end of that 30 years, if we keep those interest rates, I will have paid $66,820 more because my credit score was not excellent like Serge's credit score. So all those little things we do, oh shoot, I missed paying my credit card on time this month, or oh, I don't care, the mortgage is going to be 10 days late. Those things accumulate. I had a 680, Serge had a 740. Those little lacks of discipline cost me almost $67,000 over 30 years. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that is a car and a half or 2 cars, depending on what kind of car you like. It could be 2 years of college. If you're sending your child to state school, it could be some pretty nice vacations. All because Serge was better at managing his money behaviors than I was. People don't understand this. They just think, oh, you know, what's a credit score?
How about if in the middle of years you refinance and your credit score is good, what will happen?
Well, absolutely, if your credit score is good and you can, now it depends on interest rates, right? So if interest rates have been going up, your credit score is good, but if you refinance, the interest rate may be higher than the one you had originally because interest rates have been going up. If interest rates have been going down, then it's probably excellent, yeah. The difference though too is that when you refinance, you have refinance costs. Right? And oh my gosh, do they vary. They vary from, and Serge, you've probably seen this, there are some banks that try to charge $10,000 or $15,000 to refinance. There are brokers who will charge, and this includes title insurance and everything else, $4,500. So you have to shop around for that. Let's say you refinance and it costs you in the middle, $8,000 or $9,000. Most people roll that into their mortgage. So yes, your interest rate is lower because your credit score has gone up, but you just cost yourself another $9,000 that's going into the mortgage, and you're paying interest on that $9,000 for the length of your mortgage, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
So you need a good calculator for this kind of stuff to figure it out. So it's good, if you can, to just always have the best credit score possible.
Let me add to
Yeah,
that
go
also,
ahead.
is that, again, it all goes back to risk. So, I'll tell you something, that, let's just take a look. 20, 60, 680,
So these are
700, 720,
Scores up
740.
here, credit scores up
Right? These
here.
are credit scores, okay? And over here,
Interest rates?
lenders, banks, how do they decide what you're going to qualify for? They have a matrix. So, depending on your score, they will tell you how low the interest rate will be that you qualify for, and they'll tell you how much you can borrow and how little down payment you can put down. So if you're buying a house, you say, I only want to put 10%. I have a 680 score. Sorry, with a 680 you must put 20% or more. I have a 740, I only want to put 10%. Not a problem. We give it to you. But at 80%, which is a typical financing, We'll give it to you at 3.5. If you want to do 90% financing, it's going to cost you 3 3/4 with this score. But with this score, it could be 4 or 4 1/4. So your score is really a determining factor of what they will do for you. But it doesn't end here, because once you get your house, guess what? You're going to get insurance.
That's another thing.
And insurance, what do you think they look at? Your credit score. And for the same thing as neighbors, Carrie's insurance policy can be $3,000 and mine can be $26,000. Why is she paying $400 more per year? So a credit score has value. It has monetary value. So everything that you do, a credit card, your home insurance, your car insurance, your mortgage, your rent. Why is it some person who has a 640 or 620 credit score has to put 3 or 4 months rent additional? Because they're a higher risk. But if you walk in with a 740, oh, well, that's fine, thank you. So it really is a tell-all. So the concept behind the score is you should say to yourself, at the minimum, 680 is going to be, in my universe, the minimum. But I really want to be at 720. Because with a 720 score, you will probably hit 90 to 95% of anything that you want to buy, or lease, or acquire financially. Once you start going below this, you really are minimized. There's a lot of things you can't do. With a 680 credit score, you can't get an American Express card. 720, you can. So you'll say, oh, what's the value of that? I mean, for example, a Chase Sapphire card is a very good card. You're not going to get that with a 680. But with a 720, 740, you will. And it'll give you a line of credit, 25, 35, 40 grand on a credit card.
Yeah.
Now, to me, that's very valuable to me because I could easily put 20 grand on the card for my applications of what I do, either personal or business. So I need to have that usage. And then repay it responsibly. Whereas someone else says, I don't need that. I'm happy with $5,000 line of credit for my usage. I don't need more than that, and I don't want to pay an annual fee, and that fulfills my needs. That's a decision you have to make. But better to have a higher score and then have the option to select any card you choose to have, as opposed to having to settle for a lesser card because of your scores. Put yourself in the driver's seat. You decide.
How about if you go to the bank and then, for example, you deposit some money or you withdraw some money, and the cashier, the teller say, "Oh, you are. Do you want to open a credit card because you are qualified?" So
At a bank?
Yes.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So let's repeat the question. If you went to a bank and the teller said, have you thought about opening up a credit card with us because you are qualified?
Yes.
Okay. That is a sales line. The reason for that is that the teller has no way of knowing if you're qualified because the teller has not pulled up your credit report to determine what your credit score is and if you qualify for any of their products. That is also goes hand in hand. When you get solicitations at home in the mail, you've been qualified. You're pre-approved.
Exactly.
Yes, you can. Here's $50,000. We love you. You should never take a solicitation on someone who claims that they've pre-qualified. The only way you qualify for something is when someone actually pulls up your credit report, looks at your score, and based on the application, the terms and conditions of the application, they will tell you that you qualify. And guess what? More often than not, if you were to go to apply for a credit card, what you would get as a card and the terms and how much they would extend you are usually better if you apply yourself than if you take the solicitation. Because that solicitation is a general solicitation. So we're generally saying, you probably have around 700. So we're going to give you an offer at 700. But guess what? You have a 740. Hey, I can do better. Why did I take that offer? It seemed appealing. So those offers, and again,
So we're going to get, I thought we could talk about the car example really briefly. And then, because it's 8:15, so we're kind of moving, but this is another good example. So if you look at page 44, please, yeah. There's, again, another chart, right? Where will your credit score steer you? So it's all about car insurance. So if you look on the left-hand side, if you have a 500 to 589 poor credit rating, your car rate might be 16.64% because 500 is a bad credit score. In the same example, if you had a credit score of 720, what's the interest rate? 3.24%. Same car, somebody's paying 16.64% interest if they have a bad credit score, and somebody's paying 3.24% interest. Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy because you think that the person that doesn't have the money to pay should get the lower rate so they could pay off, you know?
it doesn't work that way.
No, I know.
What happens is that we all have the same needs. Person needs to have a car to get to work. The needs haven't changed, but the circumstances are governing price.
Right.
So in a situation like that where a person's credit has issues, where their credit score is low, they shouldn't deal with it at that moment. They should be thinking ahead of time. You know, my car is starting to talk to me. I have 6 months to a year before this car says, thank you very much. So I really need to take a look at this and what do I have to do to improve my credit score because I'm going to have to get another car. Planning ahead will not put you in that situation. And again, it goes back to proper planning, financial planning. Making these decisions ahead of time. If I'm going to get a car, what can I afford? I have to decide beforehand. I don't want to look at cars. I don't care if it's a Honda or a Mercedes. At the end of the day, per month, what can I afford? And that's the number that becomes my reality. And I have to try to meet that reality. And if I can't find a car in that price point, then I have to make a decision. How do I work around transportation? Because there's no point getting a car for $500 a month and I can't afford more than $250. It's just that simple.
So let's talk about fixing credit score. And we'll kind of wind up there because I think, since this is what you do, you have lots of interesting stories. And yeah, so you've got a bad credit score, right? And some things you can only improve by behaving and starting to pay on time. But it sounds simple when they say, gee, just call up your credit card company and ask them what's going on. There might be some things in there that aren't yours. Just call them up, just write them, and they'll fix it. Not always so simple, right, Serge?
No. There's a number of things that affect the credit score, but the way to start out is to order a credit report. You go right online. You can go, there are multiple services. You can go to annualcreditreport.com. It's free. You can order 3 credit reports, one for each credit bureau, once a calendar year. Can't do it repeatedly. So some people will go every 3 or 4 months, they'll order one, then they'll order another one and try to stretch it out. I'm of the theory you report all 3 at one time because information can report differently from one credit bureau to another. Because the credit bureaus, all they do is they store information. So the accuracy of the content of information is based on who supplied it, which is the creditor. So it may be entirely possible that your Capital One card reported perfectly to Experian. It's missing a couple of pieces of information from Equifax, and it's misreported on TransUnion. It's the same account. Each bureau didn't do anything. We just got the information you gave us. So that happens often. So there are often errors in the credit report. So the first thing you want to do is look at your credit report and say, Let me look at each account. Again, it's a snapshot in time. If you paid something 2 days ago, it has not updated. Usually takes 2 to 3 weeks for something to update in the credit bureaus, so bear that in mind. So the first thing you want to do is look. If you see any late payments, recognize them. Was I late? If you were, accept the fact that you were late. If they're not, and you know you paid in a timely manner, then that's the time that you can call up your creditor and say, hey, look, credit card company, I just looked at my credit report and I see that there's a 30-day late posted 2 months ago. I looked at my bank statements, I paid in time, there's no late charges. Why are you assessing me? And let them explain to you. It's your consumer right to ask that. And they have to explain, and if there's an error, they will correct it. If in fact you are late and you didn't pay, then those things just don't come up. But there are errors. Can things be corrected and removed from credit reports? Yes. But the way the system works is that you have to be able to question the credit bureaus why and how they're reporting something and ask them for the accuracy of their reporting. And if they can't accurately document how they're reporting that, they only have 2 choices, correct it or remove it. So it behooves you to ask. But just don't ask randomly. You have to be very, very specific. You can only be specific by having a credit report in front of you. Okay? And also there are things that you want to look at a credit report that lead to confusion. For example, if you've resided at multiple addresses over a period of time, but really you've only lived at 2 addresses the past 10 years, and some of these addresses are real old, or there's someone else's, or relatives, it could be an employer that I used to work at, you want to request the credit bureau to remove those addresses. Because when you have a lot of addresses, it portrays that you're transient. And that's not who you are. So you're allowed to question those. Also, you want to look at inquiries. There's 2 types of inquiries, a soft inquiry and a hard inquiry. Hard inquiry is when you go to the bank. I want to apply for a credit card, get a loan. A soft inquiry is your credit card issuer may periodically look at your credit. That doesn't affect your credit score. But if there's any inquiries that you do not recognize, that are not yours, then you want to contact the bureaus to get those deleted.
And it tells you the inquiries?
Oh, it'll show the inquiry, who made it, and the date. If you see an inquiry for BMW, and you say, I didn't apply for BMW, and that hard inquiry could cost you 3 points. So by deleting it, you'll also get your score back up. Also, what you want to look at on your credit report is you'll see your name, your addresses, and then AKA, also known as. If you see your name misspelled or used differently, you want to contact them to remove that. And a typical example of fraud is if I get a hold of your credit report and I look at an AKA and I use that name, and I use some address that you haven't used in 10 years, I'm going to apply for credit and just change the address and say, here's my new address. So you want to remove possibilities of fraud. So remove any AKAs, minimize addresses that are really not relevant, and also make sure that there are no inquiries that are not relevant to you. Aside from that, just carefully look at anything that you feel is not in order. We'll do 2 things. Improve your overall credit profile and increase your credit scores. Now, I deal with many people who've had problems in life here. They lost their job financially, or someone stole their credit, or they got involved in some legal entanglements and they have tax issues or collection issues or any other issues that are on their repossessions on the cars, and they're not capable of resolving these issues with the credit bureaus or with their creditors, and I'm called in to be able to help them resolve these issues so they can act more favorably. Because some of these things get very, very complicated, and it all gets reflected on the credit. So the first step is to really take a look at it. This way you have the footing as to what your credit is about.
And the earlier and sooner you look, if you only find one error, you only have one thing to deal with as opposed to cumulative over years or something.
Is there any time in the year that is more favorable to get your credit score? Or?
No. It's a snapshot in time. But the reason why you want to know is because the lesser your credit score, if you have a derogatory, you'll get penalized. It doesn't hurt as much. But the better your credit score, let me give you an illustration. If you have a 720 credit score and you have a 30-day late on your credit card and it shows up next month, this score, in all probability, will end up to be
just for one pay. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty strict.
yes. So you have to say to yourself, okay, it's the end of the month, I have to pay this, it's due in 2 days, my minimum is $40. Well, do I pay it? Well, I'll wait a couple of days. If I wait 1 day more, there's a charge, there's a late payment charge of $35. 40 has now just cost me 75. Is it worth it? No. You know what? I think I'll buy a few extra boxes of spaghetti this week, and I'll pay the $40 ahead of time, or on that day I'll call up. I want to make a payment right now, today, and not be late, because the cost is too much. Your credit score has, I can't say it enough, has monetary value. This is worth money to me.
A lot of money.
The higher the score,
Right.
financially, it costs me less to run my life. The lower the score, essentially, I could probably get $1.25 of services, $1.25 of services for $1 with this credit score, or I could get 85 cents or 80 cents of services for $1 here. The choice is up to me.
Yeah. And think of what it feels like to walk into a lender and say, I'd like a mortgage. And by the way, I'm going to sit here and negotiate because I have a really excellent credit score. So I'm going to tell you that I just shopped around. I'm really trustworthy. I'm the kind of loan you want to have on your books. So give me your best, bring it on, right? How does that feel?
Great.
Or, yeah.
It's empowering.
Yeah, or you sit down with a car loan and they'll start throwing interest rates at you and you say, hey, you just need to know my credit score is really good, guys. So you're going to have to do a little bit better than that because it's the end of the month. You guys want to make sales in the dealership. I'm ready to buy, but that rate's too high. Wouldn't it feel great to do that?
Sure.
Absolutely. This is how discipline makes money, right? You're spending less. You can put that money elsewhere just because you keep track of your cash and paying your bills. So we're going to wind up here. We can still ask more questions, but thank you, Greater Austin TV. It was an extra long video this time, but we had a super guest with lots of knowledge. So thank you so much. We'll see you in 2 weeks for Chapter 6 we're going to cover, and thank you so much for the class.